Yo guys, what's up? It's patch day again for Warcraft 3. Not the full patch yet, but this is a PTR patch node, the public test region. And I've been talking about PTR for decades and I still don't know the exact acronym. Public Test Realm. There we go, Public Test Realm. So what that is, this is the second version of the Warcraft 3 PTR and the second version of the relatively secretive Blizzard special ops team that has been working on updates to Warcraft 3 for their competitive, well, for their melee mode. You don't have to be competitive to play Warcraft 3 multiplayer, but, you know, for the melee mode. So we're getting balance patches. Now, I heard that some or all or many or some of these changes had been highlighted as possible balance patch changes several years ago, in a process that is not uncommon in the game development industry, especially if a team is downsizing. The work had already been planned out, but has not been done yet. And then later, when the superintendent stumbles upon the notes, decides to learn programming and implements them. However the method is, I'm grateful for these changes, and it looks like we're going through several versions of the PTR again, and it makes it feel a little bit like Christmas. Arcane Tower hero feedback reduced from 16 to 14. What this means is the amount of mana that they burn, and then the amount of mana that has a percentage conversion to damage as well, dealt to that hero on heroes, is gonna go down from 16 to 14. Now, usually I just kind of read these and I say, I think this and that is how it was. But now let's go a little deeper and look at the actual situation. So I've opened up one page for every unit and building that has changed. So what has been happening on Arcane Tower? Well, Arcane Towers came out 3 July of 2003 when Frozen Throne hit the shelves, apparently. Guard Towers and Arcane Towers. Or maybe even earlier. It might have been earlier. But anyway, the first time they got a balance change was the 3rd of July 2003. And in a recent note, 9 May last year, Arcane Tower feedback went up from 12 to 16, while still always being 24 on regular units. I did not agree with this change, but I don't believe that Orc Human is in a very bad spot. I feel like it's in a pretty good spot. It feels balanced. So from the perspective of an Orc player, I think this has not destroyed the balance as much as I feared it would. So now it's going to go down from 16 to 14. So I don't have a strong opinion on this. I think it does make a difference, but it's difficult to say exactly where this is coming from, which matchup it's looking to address. It definitely has an effect on every single matchup, right? Arcane is used both aggressively and defensively. It is fantastic against Demon Hunter, Warden, Farseer, TC, you know, you name it. Anything and anyone that wants to go in that range. I think 16 is probably too much. Mana burn is strong, so this does feel like a good nerf. Knights and Sundering Blades. They are halfway between Sundering and Sauntering, which I suppose horses do saunter as well, though they're more of a galloper than a saunterer. But Knights and Sundering Blades no longer require lumber mill to build. So again, a removal of prerequisite, which has been very common in the last 6 years of balance changes for Warcraft 3. For instance, the recent Tauren change for Taurens to be tier 2 instead of tier 3 is a removal of the tier 3 prerequisite. And for Frostworms from the Boneyard, you no longer need to build a sacrificial pit to prepare the Boneyard. So that is a removal of a prerequisite. Yeah, so there's been a number of changes to make certain things more accessible. And in this case, you no longer need to build a lumber mill to get knights out. So not quite going all the way to tier 2, but more available. So the question is this a good thing? In the recent patch, Sundering Blade had become an upgrade again that you need to upgrade in the first version of the PTR. And so that was a extra friction to get your knights out in full power. This is a friction reduction. However, Sundering Blades upgrade will go up from 100 to 175. So what I didn't really cover last time, but I would like to look at now, is how good is Sundering Blades? Sundering Blades increases damage dealt to enemy targets with medium armor by 10%. Now, in Warcraft 3, generally the way that upgrades work, the value that they have when we look at regular attack and armor upgrades, attack upgrades roughly give about 10% bonus damage. It doesn't say so exactly. It's a damage dice bonus? Damage dice bonus. Oh, it works with damage dice. But from my observation, one attack upgrade is always about 10% damage, and one armor upgrade is always 12% bonus effective health. And so Sundering Blades is roughly like a normal upgrade. Therefore, you could say that when it comes to knights attacking medium armor, roughly, unless there's some kind of special interaction with the way that normal attack damage works on medium armor and the amplification that normal attack enjoys on medium armor, unless there's something mathematical going on there, if this just means 10% bonus damage for knights on fiends, then this is like a fourth attack upgrade essentially. Melee attack upgrade number 1, Iron Forged Swords, Steel Forged Swords, and Mithril Forged Swords give 10, 20, 30% bonus damage. With Sundering, that's also 10, right? But this doesn't need a blacksmith, it's made from the barracks. And it only works on fiends, not on other things. So when a normal upgrade level 1 is 150 consummate resources, and the second upgrade is 350 resources, the 200 resource combination cost for Sundering Blades is relatively fairly priced for an early attack upgrade. That makes it's more targeted, more focused on medium, but the actual cost you're paying for it, 100, seems roughly fairly priced. However, we don't usually compare unit-specific upgrades, unique upgrades, to their equivalent in attack and armor upgrades. And the reason is, usually you don't have unique upgrades that are so mundane as a percentage damage increase, which has a lot of design overlap with normal attack and armor upgrades. Therefore, it's in this strange spot where it's both comparable to attack upgrades, but not comparable because normally unique upgrades do not get compared to these upgrades, as these stand by themselves and it's not an either or, but it's you can have both, right? So I do think this is a bit of a strange thing to exist in general. From a design perspective, it's not super creative, and it just makes knights even better at attacking medium armor units, which they already were. However, it's been around for 6 years now, or 4 to 6 years. When did Sundering Blades become a thing? It became embedded in 2021, and it became a thing in 2019. So it's been around for 5 years by now. Used to cost 200, and it used to do 15% bonus damage against fiends, which was insane. With the 10% and the rather large price point of 175, that is not a priority upgrade anymore, unless you really just have mountains of lumber and it really doesn't matter. In Warcraft 3, lumber is not as important of a resource as gold, except when it is. Yeah, it's kind of like lumber is never an issue unless you don't have any. But for gold, you always want more. I see lumber as a timing limitation resource. You don't have enough lumber for the first 10-15 minutes of the game to do everything you want to do, so you have to make decisions. But after a certain point, 10-15 minutes, lumber, for the most part, in the vast majority of games, ceases to become a super relevant resource. Unless you're running a really tight ship on your workers, or unless the opponent has killed some of your workers, or you've lost them in some way, right? Then it can become a thing. But if this was a gold increase, I'd say, oh my god, that's pretty egregious. But as a lumber increase, it's more of a delay than the fact that you may never get it by its value. This is kind of like balancing each other out in a bit. You can get knights more easily. You don't necessarily need a mill. But then on the other hand, you do need a mill because you need more lumber. So yeah, it's some kind of streamline. I don't feel super strongly about this. I don't think much of this moves the needle too much. It's almost like a small change for the sake of change. And I still like that too, because it gets us to talk about the game and it gets some PR for the game. Polymorph hero duration. For those of you that don't know, the previous patch from about a week ago, which is on the PTR, has introduced Polymorph's ability to be used on heroes, which is pretty crazy. And for a 3-second duration, no less. I tried this out in this video. Bing! And this video is also in the description if you want to click on it, or maybe it's in the top right there in the top right. You can click it. It is pretty insane. When you combine Polymorph with Stormbolt, you can get some pretty good CC chain on enemy heroes. 1.5 seconds is probably a fair reduction, but it's the fact that you can do it at all that remains pretty crazy. But like I said before, sometimes crazy is good, because the amount of games, even with such a buff on Polymorph, that you're actually going to get Polymorph is probably less than 1 in 50. Usually, human and any game, any race in one-on-one Warcraft 3, which by the way is not the only Bible and existence of Warcraft 3, but it's what I play and what I'm an expert in. In one-on-one, the amount of times you could tech to Polymorph, even if it's very strong, is less than 1 in 50. In those few games where it goes to the super late game and you have Arcane Sanctums and you're tier 3 and you've even upgraded to invisibility sorceresses, which is not something you always do, and then you even go to master training, which is something you virtually never do, then Polymorph can be pretty good, provided the enemy doesn't dispel. So there's a lot of conditionals. That's why I think the fact that it's strong is not that big of a deal. It reminds me a little bit of, you know, Divine Rapier in Dota 2. And it's super rare, but it's spectacular when it happens. And something I'm becoming more and more aware of is that OP, spectacular things can be pretty fun in even the most serious hardcore RTSs. So if people have fun with this, I think this could be cool. And it can also work in FFA or 4-on-4 with a greater sense of regularity, and that could be pretty strong. It can be a fun toy for human. And I firmly believe that every patch that comes out for popular games with a large player base, and although I don't have official numbers, I think Warcraft 3 has a player base of more than 50,000 players per month, monthly active users, my guess, right? When I look at how many people play on W3 Champions, on BNet, and even you have other private servers like in Asia, NetEase Battle Platform, I think there's more than 50,000 monthly active users. So active game, a live game. I think in games like this, any patch should bring fun toys to play for every player, for every race. You don't want to get into a situation where every patch note is a massive nerf fiesta for all things that are strong. That's just not fun to get into. If you're a human player and it's like bam, 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 then you know, that's it's not that fun. So Arctic, who worked at Blizzard before, he's in chat right now. What's up? How's it going, Ryan? We talked about this in 2019, and we decided not to allow for Polymorph working on heroes because it denies mana regeneration, it denies experience gain, and losing control of your hero feels bad. Right. And of course this happens a lot in Dota 2, where you lose control of your hero. And it feels even worse there than in Warcraft 3, because that's all you got there. Here you still at least have units, you have forms of dispel, and do not rely on your allies to save you. But it's interesting that you're saying that you did think or talk about it, which means that this may also be some changes that that has been on the table before, let's say. And also, I'm getting some notes from one of my viewers that says daily active users is around 17,000, but don't know about monthly, which I would say, if daily is 17k, my guesstimate of 50k per month is probably not bad. All right, let's move on. Again, my conclusion is I don't think Polymorph hero duration, I don't think Polymorph on heroes is something that I immediately see a problem with right now. Troll Headhunter base damage go down from 22 to 21. Together with the Tauren on tier 2 availability, which probably is mostly only useful in Orc Mirror and against human, you can say that Orc has had a buff. And this is a staple unit for Orc that is receiving a nerf. I don't mind Headhunter nerfs, but I think at the same time what should be looked at is Wind Rider buffs. There's something wrong with Wind Riders. They're fast and they're high damage, but they lose to almost everything in the game. They're like a cheesy unit that gives too much experience and is too vulnerable. I don't know exactly how they can be made better or if they should be made better, because it is a type of unit that when it gets too strong, as an air unit that comes out early, it can just feel cheesy and overwhelm and become this binary. Oh, well, you don't have enough defenses against it and now you're dead. So that can be a thing. Who wins, Footman or Wind Rider? Footman wins. Footman with defense upgrade wins. Yeah, I and many people call them flying tomes of experience. So yeah, you could nerf Headhunters if you like, and it is potentially risky because Headhunter is a staple unit, and the only other staple unit Orc has is a Raider. I say Headhunter and Raider are the most staple units in the game for Orc. Everything else has counter purposes and is not as staple. And I think most races have more staple units. You've got the Bear and the Dryad for Night Elf. I think those are the only staples. Bear and Dryad. Everything else is more subject to countering. And then Undead has Ghoul, Fiend, and Statue, and maybe Destroyer. And Human has Night Rifle, Footman, Flying Machine, Priest, Breaker. I think Human probably has the most staple units. What's a staple unit? It's a unit that when you put them in a stapler and you bolt them against the plank, it can hold itself together with a staple unit is a unit in my mind that, let's say if you don't know what your opponent is doing, has a decent application, and that with proper skill and micro and decisions, you can make them work in almost any situation. So it's a unit, if you don't have information and you can't scout or you didn't scout and you make that unit, you're generally going to be okay, or at least can adapt out of that unit only into something that helps support them. So yeah, that's what it is. A fundamental staple unit. So I find these nerfs potentially risky. It's like risky to touch any of these units, Fiend, Rifle, Headhunter, and Archer, because they're super staple. But it is not a huge nerf, and it can be okay. Healing Ward, mana cost reduction. Healing Ward has a number of issues. It comes out of a unit that is not very dangerous in combat. Witch Doctor can't beat almost anything. Witch Doctors will beat Footmen, and Grunts and Ghouls, and and that's about it. So there's 3 units in the game that Witch Doctors can beat in combat, but they offer an insanely powerful level 1 spell, Sentry Ward, which is a 10-minute Observer Ward that is invisible and has True Sight. Incredibly powerful, and I've always had dreams of making Witch Doctors work, even 1 or 2, in any game, because you think, what if I could slowly start having sentry wards all over the map that reveal huge areas and have True Sight? Wouldn't that be broken? Wouldn't that increase the quality of my decision making by so much? And at least in one-on-one, every time I've tried, including when I was winning tournaments in my prime, etc., always that Witch Doctor that you try to make early in lieu of a Shaman or your second Shaman or your third Shaman or your Shaman upgrade, that Witch Doctor production time out of your lodge, almost always a debilitating effect on your power to control the map, even if you see where they are. Because now you have 1 Dispel less, or you don't have Lightning Shield yet, or you don't have enough health and mana on your Shaman because your upgrade is late. So usually Doctor only can come out after your first 3 Shamans and upgrade. Then you could try to squeeze in a Doctor, and even then you still feel the absence of your 4th Shaman. And this is based on many hundreds of games of experience from me, or thousands of games over the last many decades. And so you've got a Doctor that has trouble to come into existence because of the way that they do not directly interact in a battle with the opponent. Even despite that, It is one of the most broken things to have one doctor with Sentry Ward. There's a lot of things that are super broken in Warcraft 3 that do not get into play that much because of the opportunity cost and the high octane competition that you're doing against people of the same skill level. Of course, my people that I play against of my level and people that play at the middle level or low level against their own level. Always you may find that a doctor is a unnecessary or inconvenient or unallowed concession to a more dangerous unit. So that is Sentry Ward. If you upgrade the Doctor, they get Stasis Ward, which has received a number of buffs recently, which is pretty cool. Stasis Trap Ward delay has been decreased from 10 to 9 seconds. The detection radius, aka how near you need to be to trigger it, has been to trigger it and to reveal it briefly, has been reduced from 250 range to 175. And the activation time of exploding after it gets revealed when someone gets near is now only half a second instead of a second. So it's not easy to remove it on time if you stumble upon a trap ward. That's pretty damn cool. But there has not been a game in history of one-on-one competitive Warcraft 3 where Stasis Ward has made an impact. In all of my games ever, in all of the games I've ever watched of Lyn, Fly, maybe Fly, okay, maybe Fly has had 1 or 2 moments where he's Stasis Ward, because he used to like to go for the 35-minute Witch Doctor edition on Echo Isles once it's gridlocked into a 2 versus 2 base situation. But yeah, I think the last time and the only time I saw Stasis Ward was probably in 2009 or something. But yeah, so it's really hard to tech to Stasis Ward. Now, Healing Ward I've seen in a couple of competitive games. I've probably done it a couple of times myself against Human in the Super Late game or against Night Elf. And Fly sometimes does it on Echo Isles against Undead or Human to heal up after combat. Mid-combat Healing Wards are childishly easy to stop by a pro player because they only have 1 hit to be killed. And they can be stolen by spell breakers as well with control magic, which is also a tier 3 upgrade. However, because healing wards, just like the tranquility of the Keeper of the Grove that we discussed in the hero ultimates tier list, because it can be used outside of combat, healing ward is one of the best things that you can get against someone that has anti-magic, because you can use it out of combat. Right? And normally if you make Bloodlust and they have breakers, spell breakers, they will steal your Bloodlust, but Heal Ward, you can use it outside of combat during creeping. So it is a very powerful ability that you generally don't get to on time. And this does actually help. Witch Doctors with Master Training do not come out of the gate with 200 mana. So even after getting 2 upgrades and minimum 1 Doctor, who is not allowed to place any sentries. If you just have 1 Doctor, you can't place any sentries, because then when Master Training finishes, you've got almost no mana, so you can't cast Healing Ward, which is what you just invested technology into. So either we're talking about 2 Doctors with Master Training, which is 4 consecutive production sprees in the Lodge, which is 4 fewer Shamans, and you need tier 3. Or you have 1 and you can't Sentry Ward anywhere. So it is a long route and a long investment to get there for a one-on-one game. However, this is extremely powerful in 4-on-4 Healing Ward. And will continue to be so, depending on the matchup, because if they have breakers, they'll steal it. If they have destroyers, they will remove it, unless the enemy has anti-air superiority, where destroyers just keep dying because they're against flying machines or bats. So I think this change is pretty fine. I think there's good supporting arguments for Healing Ward to become more accessible, because they've pretty much never been used. Good change. Next, Torrent build time. I think this is a good nerf. When Torrents are tier 3, it takes a long time to get there and to start making them. When I started testing out Torrents in tier 2, I realized they probably produce too fast. Yeah, it's so fast to get 3 Torrents, actually, right? Normally, you go to tier 3 so fast that you break your neck at the speed that you get there. You have no units and you die to rush. Or you do have units, you go like 6 headhunters, 7 headhunters, 2 raiders, and then you go for a totem and you get 1 tauren. You'll generally have about 1 tauren in your army of, if you go to tier 3. 1 tauren in your 50 population army fits. But with the tier 2 taurens, I was able to fit in 3 taurens into my 50 population army. And that's without spending all the way to go to tier 3. So that was fast too. Like I was able to add them to my army very fast. I thought, okay, now that they're tier 2, they have to produce slower. Maybe even slower than this. Maybe even slower than 44 seconds. But I think it's a nice change, a nice beginning to nerf it by 5 seconds, and it might need more. Community has been talking about this as well, the tier 2 torrents. It's a big topic, and most people, including myself, think that they will have good use against human, because human defense with militia and footmen, like early on. But then late game, they're the same as any time, and they can get kited. They're not super useful against undead with destroyers and lich, and they're not super useful against night elf because they lose to most things there as well. But against human and maybe an orc mirror, I think we may see some of them. Let's wait and see when they are like too strong, OP, and then hopefully can have more change to address it again, because this is an exciting change that could be pretty cool. And I really haven't seen high level orc versus human yet with the tauren at tier 2, so it's hard to say if people are overblowing the issue or if they continue to be useless actually, or if they're actually going to be really, really good. My expectation is that they're not actually going to be that scary. That's my expectation. Tauren base pulverized damage. I think this is another good change. Taurens have an upgrade that's called Pulverize. It used to cast 100/250 and would add 60 damage with a smaller amount of damage on the outer circles of the Pulverize. Then the Pulverize had been given a passive that deals 20 damage before you get this upgrade. And the upgrade has been made cheaper with only 175 lumber. And I was thinking, now that they come out to tier 2, if human race suffers as a result of the tier 2 torrents, maybe this should be less. And I did not utter this thought, but I did have it. And so I find it pretty interesting and a good sign, in my opinion anyway, that the balance team at Blizzard has also decided to reduce this a bit. It looks like that's coming from an intelligent place to me. The upgrade of tier 3, the upgrade of Pulverize is still tier 3, yes, but they have a baseline passive that is not an upgrade, that is, they come out of the gate with it. So the Tauren build time had previously, about half a year ago, been reduced by 5 seconds, and that has done almost nothing for their uptake. So it is also a reversal, and now in a different direction above. So that kind of makes sense too, why they felt like they produced so fast. As you can see here, pulverized damage had recently been made cheaper in 9 May 2023, and it was in 2019, 5 years ago, that baseline pulverized was given that deals 20 damage. And also pulverized had been made cheaper. And that's about it. And it was 2018 that pulverized and torrents suddenly required a war mill, which I don't even know where the hell that came from. Okay, next, Night Elf. I had seen from the Back to Warcraft guys that they felt that the level 1 Searing should do more than 10. Level 1 Searing attacks has always done 10, and it has never been particularly strong. And I actually agreed with that as well. This is the history of Priestess of the Moon balance changes. In 2002, 5 July, Priestess of the Moon starfall damage was reduced from 75 to 50 damage per star. The duration was increased from half a minute to 3/4 of a minute, and the damage factor was reduced versus buildings. Starfall cooldown went down from 3 to 2 minutes, 4 months later. Channeling Starfall in 2004 would now cancel Invulnerability Potion. That's funny that used to work. Then in 2018, which is very recent from now, 6 years ago, her base attack cooldown was reduced, which means she attacks faster. Which is funny because I still feel like she takes huge siestas between auto attacks. Priestess of the Moon Starfall mana cast reduction from 200 to 150. And the cooldown went back down. Wait, what? The Starfall cooldown was increased from 2 to 3 minutes. Oh, in 2002. Yeah, okay, it was increased. And now back to the 2002 form. So it's been 22 years that this minute was stolen. And now Starfall gets the minute back after 22 years. You can't give me my life back, but you can at least give me justice. Now, Searing Attacks was always kind of weak. It's 10 damage per level per Searing Attack upgrade, 10, 20, 30. It was cool to see the patch brought out 10, 25. What did it do? 10, 25 or 10, 30, 40? I don't know. A bit more damage at level 2 and 3. I tested this out in a recent video. Ka-ching! I don't know if editor's going to add the video to Priestess if he gets to this. Yeah, it didn't feel like enough at level 1 in particular. So they're changing that. 2 extra damage at level 1. Now we're talking Dota 2 changes. 2 extra damage at level 1 is a wonderful Dota 2 style change. And I salute it. Let's see. I'm ready for the new Priestess of the Moon domination era. Priestess of the Moon Starfall duration reduced from 45 to 30 seconds, so back down again. The Starfall damage increased to an in-between point from 2002, where it was 75. Now it's 60 instead of 50 per star. And Keeper of the Grove, Force of Nature, Manaka. By the way, I think all of these are fine. I agree it's fine. Right? It's all good. It's all good. Fun new toy for Night Elf. Let's see it. Keeper of the Grove, Force of Nature, mana cast reduction from 100 to 85. This might be the first one I disagree with. I think Keeper of the Grove is a strong and useful hero against Orc, Undead. Not very useful in Night Elf Mirror, but that's their own fault because they got Mana Burn and Wisp, which is the bane of magic. Magic is an abomination. Should have thought of that before you developed a Demon Hunter. That makes it the same as Feral Spirit. Yeah, Feral Spirit was nerfed from 75 to 85, and Force of Nature was always 100. But keep in mind, Force of Nature summons 2, 3, 4, and you can have 12 at the same time, and not 2. And also they can get Force of Nature upgrade, and also Keeper of the Grove has an Entangle lockdown ability that kills hella units early game. Force of Nature used to be 125, yeah, that's true. And Keeper became useful because of this. The famous or infamous Matt Morris patch of 1.29, 2018, 10 April. Entangling Roots damage up. Keeper of the Grove has +1 intelligence. Treant damage is up by 2. Entangling duration for units reduced slightly, but increased for heroes at level 2 and 3. And Tranquility reworked now gives a 3-second invulnerability at the start of the cast. Heal amount has been doubled. That sparked the first ever hegemony period for Keeper of the Grove ever since, I don't know, 2002 or 3 or so. Right? Keeper of the Grove was a semi-weak but not useless hero from 2005 to 2017. And this, the Matt Morris patch, brought Keeper, and this and other changes brought Keeper into the mega meta. The mega meta. And then you had the Force of Nature buff. Then we started seeing the nerfs. Treant damage goes down by 1. Entangling Roots goes down on heroes again. Entangling Roots cast range reduction. And I think this change is when Keeper reached a more balanced point again. The 800 range on Entangle instead of the 600 it is now was insane. To put things in perspective, you guys may know about nighttime and daytime cycle in Warcraft 3. Daytime vision is 1800 and nighttime vision is 800. So, of course, Night Elf used to have tier 1 ultra vision, and that meant they always had 1800 vision, which means they see more than twice as you. And this meant that the Entangle Roots was the edge of vision in night. That means the moment you see Keeper, you will get entangled and die. But he sees you from a long time, from a long way away. So this was a really good nerf. And then let's see what they did in the last 4 years. Base damage back down to 14, which was what it used to be. Invulnerability 1 second. Then invulnerability was removed on Tranquility. Healing was nerfed. No, healing was increased. Healing was increased even, which is also insane. Keeper of the Grove night vision radius. Oh, heroes have more than 800. All heroes have more than 800, I think. Maybe. Intelligence back down to its prior numbers. So a lot of this is just cancelling the Matt Morris patch. Keeper of the Grove Thorns aura damage increase in last year, January, 19 January 2023. Tranquility cooldown back up to 2 minutes instead of 1 minute. And entangling roots on units reduced further. I think Keeper is in a pretty okay spot right now. He's useful. He can feel quite oppressive, but he's not super insanely broken. Will 85 mana Force of Nature upset that balance? It is a significant buff. I don't know if it's needed. It feels like quite a lot. Where is Night Elf at right now? Like how is Night Elf against Orc? It's fine. I think Night Elf against Orc is strong. How is Night Elf against Undead? I think they struggle a bit. Night Elf against Undead. How's Night Elf against Human? Maybe it's tough, I would say. Maybe it's a little tough. I think Night Elf Human is relatively balanced, but maybe never easy. I think this is mostly true. Night Elf versus Undead is hard, very hard. Night Elf against Human is a bit hard. Night Elf against Orc is a bit easy. And Human Night Elf and Orc Night Elf is not super out of whack, but maybe Night Elf Undead struggles a bit. So is this going to help the most in any particular matchup? Is this targeting the correct matchups? I would say no. I feel like Keeper is strongest against Orc, and therefore this will benefit Night Elf against Orc the most, which is the matchup that needs it the least. Right? What Night Elf needs to change is something that helps them specifically against Undead, not against Orc. Not against Orc. Something that helps against Undead. And maybe a bit against Human as well. So try to look at the meta and the variety of strategies that get used and target something specifically for Night Elf against Undead. I have an idea. You could buff Hippogriff Riders. You could buff Hippogriff Riders, Hippogriffs, Fairy Dragons, Dryads, yeah, something like that. And Ancient Protectors, perhaps. All of those get used a lot against Undead. Whereas if you wanted to nerf Night Elf against Orc, you would address nerfing Keeper, Druid of the Talon, Huntress. Those get used against Orc. So I don't think Keeper should get buffed because it affects Night Elf Orc too much. I'm not saying you should necessarily buff those that I mentioned. I'm just saying look at the units that get used against Undead and do something about those. And hopefully those units get used less against Orc. And then upset the balance there. AP affect Night of Orc too? Yeah, of course it does. Of course, because they are used to rush the Orc. So the only units that get used against Undead, but mostly not against other race, is Hippogriff Rider and Hippogriff. So maybe they can make Hippogriff 5% faster, or 10 movement speed faster, 20 movement speed faster. I think that's a bigger buff for Night Elf against Undead, while doing almost nothing for the Human and Orc matchup. Let's make Hippogriff 10-20 movement speed faster, and maybe Hippogriff Rider get another 50 range, something like that. I think that's gonna be the correct targeted approach for Night Elf buffs, and I do think they need something like that. Moonwell regeneration increase. This will of course buff them against everyone. Let's take a look at Moonwells because there's a large history here. There's a lot to unpack. Moonwells 2002 May 5th. Sorry, July 5th. Moonwells now give 50% mana and 200% health. Yeah, so what this means is when a Moonwell has 100 mana and a dying man approaches it that also has no mana, half of the Moonwell mana gets split into giving health, and half of the Moonwell mana gets split into giving mana. So if the Moonwell has 200 mana, he will give 100 to each. The 100 mana will give 200 health and 50 mana. That's how it gets split. And so that means if someone that has full mana shows up, then they can make use of the full 200 mana from the Moonwell to get 400 health. But if they have any missing mana points, for the amount of missing mana, it will be split in the manner that I just described. So now you know how Moonwells work. You cannot choose what you heal with it. And then Wellspring upgrades Moonwells to have 125 extra mana. 425 instead of 300. This was a change in 2004. And then in 2018, Moonwell mana regeneration at night was given 0.25 extra, which was a 20% increase in mana regeneration at night. This was not a supported change by argumentation. It was just done during a time during which Night Elf was already very strong. As you may notice, this is 3 months after the Matt Morris patch that had everyone and their grandmother playing Keeper of the Grove, Mass Glaive Throwers, Mass Archers, and winning every single matchup. So this was an absurdly timed buff to Moonwells that fell out of the sky with no supporting evidence of why it should even be necessary during a time that everyone was winning with Night Elf. I even had a better win rate on my Night Elf account, even though I'm about 30% better as Orc than Night Elf. I would be like 90% win rate on Orc, 86 on Human, 80 on Undead, but I have 96% win rate on Night Elf, just spamming Keeper and Glaive Throwers and Archers. And then they buffed this, which was insane. And then recently they nerfed it, which I think was good, because it's too easy, it's too forgiving to have that much mana regen. Some Night Elf players from the community were angry because they saw me as responsible for my feedback being used to affect this change. And I say, maybe they looked at my feedback, and I always try to be reasonable, and I think this is reasonable. But now they're looking at the Moonwells, and they're saying, hey, it goes back up from 135 to 145. Keeping in mind that the original number was 125, and the buffed number was 150. So they're thinking of bringing it almost to 150. So they're playing, how do you call this? Democracy politics, like somewhere in between. They want to bring it up again because they think Night Elf is having a hard time or something, which, but not quite to 1.5. And I will say that when I played Night Elf recently on my Night Elf ladder account, somehow I could not make them seem as OP as when I play against them. There might be something there, but it is also a stylistic and an investment into being good with a certain race that is lacking. I'm not a Night Elf main, so I cannot show them off in that way. We all know Undead is good, but not all of us can play Undead like happy, right? So yeah, I think this is not needed. I think this is not needed. I think it should be 135 or 1.4, but also I don't think it's the end of the world. It will help them. They will staff their hero against Orc, and then they will heal it, and it's gonna come back. They will go Demon Panda Bears. They'll staff their Panda at 10% life, and then he's gonna staff of teleport back in from all the Moonwells with full health and mana and Fire Breath, everything. And then you will hear me. Then I get to be angry at the Night Elf players in this community. So, Wellspring regeneration mana bonus has been reduced. So, at least that is addressed. Wellspring is pretty bonkers. Goes from 300 max mana capacity to 400 instead of 425. So I think that's a nice concession. This helps them in the early game, where it is most helpful against defending against Footman harass and Ghoul harass. They'll have a bit more mana so they can try to survive so they don't die outright to early undead and human harass, which is something I'm hearing is happening from time to time recently as you face early undead and human aggression. Orc aggresses the least against Night Elf because usually you just die if you try that as Orc. At least until your Shadow is level 3, you don't. So it won't affect Orc Night Elf as much on average. So this is perhaps a decent change. Both of these I feel like are relatively okay balanced. And the Mountain Giant no longer going down to 6 food from 7 food. Not bad. So far I think these changes are really good. But we've got one more to look at. Let's look at Undead. Nerubian Tower damage type change from melee to piercing. Nerubian Tower is special. It was the only tower that had a normal attack type. This made it deal extra damage to things like Headhunter, Archer, Crypt Fiend, Spellbreaker. So why is this? Yes, it was always melee. Why is this? First, we'll talk about what this does, and then we'll talk about other things. So, I just mentioned less damage on those ranged units. It means less damage on heroes. Normal has a better relationship to hero armor than piercing. I think normal is 50%, piercing is 35%, but let me go ahead and look it up. Liquipedia, armor types. Armor and attack types. Can I click this? Damage calculation. Where's the graph? Where's the graph? What the hell is this? Nerds. What is this? Normal attack damage against hero. Oh, it is 100%. And piercing is 50%. So Nerubian damage is halved on heroes from this change. On Rifleman, it goes from, see, normal against medium, to 150% to 75%. So Rifleman damage is also halved from the Nerubian. The only thing that it now does better is killing Frostworms, Chimera, Wind Riders, Hippogriff Riders, Hippogriffs. So it's going to become better against air and worse against everything else. I didn't realize how much better on average normal damage is compared to piercing. Piercing really is against almost everything a weakness, just against unarmored, aka caster units and gargoyles, and maybe hippogriffs. So they're going to be better against air units and casters, Nerubians, and worse against range units, buildings, heroes. Okay, I think from a perspective of their application, this is not a bad change. Not a bad change. However, it is bad just for one reason. We lose a part of the unique DNA of the Nerubian. Oh, and they're better against Hunter's Rush. Oh, this actually makes Undead fast expansion against Night Elf more possible. Right now, at low level play, Undead Expo still works against Night Elf. But at high level, we pretty much don't see it much. Wouldn't this be potentially enabling Undead Tower Rush against Night Elf? Like, I know it's worse against archers and heroes. It's better against Huntress. I think actually this nerfs Tower Rush against Night Elf. Doesn't it nerf Tower Rush against Night Elf? Because usually Night Elf will have Demon and 5 archers. And Piercing does less against all of them. And against buildings. No, this nerfs Tower Rush, but it buffs Undead Fast Expansion. Because Undead Fast Expo, if the Undead is showing what he's doing, Night Elf will generally make 2nd Ancient of War and a Hunter's Hall, and then just do Hunter's Hall in. And now you can just make 3 Nerubian towers. You don't even need to make a graveyard. And you're gonna hold off those Huntresses with relative ease. Okay. At least Tower Rush against a Night Elf has been addressed. Generally, I think it's an okay change for the average macro game. And it potentially opens up a new strategy for Undead against Elf. which is risky because strategical variety is a balance advantage. It's always a balance advantage to have more options. And if Undead's already strong against Elf, then yeah, you take away the Tower Rush option, but you add an expansion option. I'd say that's a relative buff for Undead against Elf. So, risky. So I'm not sure if I like this, but I'm not sure I dislike it either. Frost Nova slow duration reduced on units. 100% yes. Frost Nova is super OP against everything. Any nerf is welcome, in my opinion. Crypt Lord in Maple Syrup. Mana cost reduced from 100 to 90. Let's take a look at Crypt Lord. Impale actually 100. I thought it was 110. It must have been nerfed a couple of years ago. Crypt Lord, Impale. Where did it get buffed? Oh my god! Damage in 2018 was buffed. Impale can no longer be interrupted. Impale stun duration reduced. Has it always been 100? I don't see any buff. I could swear it used to be 110. Isn't it one? Really? It's always been 100. Okay. Alright. I'm not going to swear it then. I could swear it, but I'm not going to swear it then. I see 110 in the damage only. Oh. Oh yeah. The third damage. Oh, okay. It was 110, says Mamak. Was it though? Was it 110 in Rock? No, it was 0 in Rock. Crypt Lord was added in Frozen Throne. No Reign of Chaos. Okay. Maple Syrup is cheaper. From 100 to 90. Death and Decay, mana cost reduction. I think that's fine. Wasn't there something else that happened to Death and Decay? Or not? No. Oh, I recently talked about Death and Decay in my tier list. Oh, now I'm gonna have to redo everything again. Now that it's 200 mana, did it move up a tier? Honestly, I think this is fine. 250 is very expensive for an ability that can be cancelled. Ghoul Frenzy research time from 45 to 60 seconds. Interesting. Interesting. What do we think about that? The Ghoul Frenzy. Where's the ghoul? Show yourself. Ghoul Frenzy is 45 seconds research time. 100/150 resources cost, gives 35, now 30% attack speed, 80 movement speed, 45 seconds. Right now, Ghoul Frenzy timing is one of the most pivotal timings in the game. Undead gets the tier 3, gets Orb of Corruption, gets Ghoul Frenzy, picks up Dark Ranger, gets Destroyer upgrade, gets a Destroyer, and then they hit you. This can hit as early as 9 minute 30. And if they're a bit delayed, it may be 10 minutes or 10:30. This is a 45-second delay on the research time that I think is a good and fair nerf for ghouls. And yeah, I think that's fine. A 15-second delay in the timing. It is definitely very significant, but it doesn't make them weaker in combat. They're still good in combat, they just come out a little later, giving people 15 more seconds to prepare. Web upgrade reduced cost from 150 to 100. I think that is also fair, especially considering ghouls have been addressed twice now with the 5% attack speed and now the 15-second frenzy timing. Web is very expensive. It is very good, like I mentioned in my undead unit tier list. Fiends are incredibly versatile, and Web is very instant and very long duration. And very deadly for flying units. It is very expensive. Maybe it should be. I think honestly 125 or 150 is the right price. This feels too good actually. Try to be positive here and see it in the right light, but I think this is too cheap. I could see 125 or keep it at 150. It is so good. Hard to say. I would like to know what you guys think about this. Let me know in the comments. Boneyard cost reduced from 175 to 100 to 150 to 100. Agree. I think I agree with this big time. In fact, I wouldn't mind 150. Boneyards are like frostworms. I rank them as a tier D unit for never coming into the game and never having a reason to make them. You can't get to them on time, and even if you get them, there are plenty of counters. This 25 gold is a step in the right direction, but I feel like it is a step over a canyon when you really need a large jump. So it feels like they'll still be at the bottom of the canyon with this. No wings. Give Boneyard wings. Give Boneyard wings. Give Frostworm wings. Justice for Frostworms. Make them usable again. 150, 150. I saw someone on my YouTube comment say Frostworms should be tier 2, since Taurens now are. Keep dreaming. Let your dreams die last. It is beautiful to dream. Doesn't make any sense. That man is right. No, he is not. That man is delusional. Taurens are not gonna beat Frostworms in tier 2. Frostworms will beat everything at tier 2. Wand of Negation charges reduced from 3 to 2, and the cost reduced from 200 to 150. I feel like I saw this change somewhere. Either it was Remo Demo's Back to Warcraft video, or it was on Reddit. I don't know, I saw it somewhere, and they must have liked the idea. Wand of Negation at tier 2 is still something that I'm really not sure is correct. Been doing more thinking since my last video. So what happens? Wait, that's not Warcraft music, is it? This is lo-fi with my cat. Alright, back to Warcraft. Here's why Wand of Negation is a little bit problematic, right? Right now, Undead, it starts at Necropolis, which is tier 1. They then go to tier 2, which is Halls of the Dead. Oh, I'm messing up my parenthesis consistency. They go to Halls of the Dead, which is tier 2. Then they go to Black Citadel, which is tier 3. During this phase, they make Slaughterhouse. Then they make Destroyer Upgrade. And then they make a Destroyer. I call this tier 3.5 because there are several steps that happen after you reach tier 3. This right now is the only form of Dispel that Undead has. And that is a bit of an issue. Every other race has 2 forms of Dispel. Undead only has 1. And it comes out very late. So what are some of the things that Undead needs to Dispel in a standard game of Warcraft 3? Well, there are summons, right? Wolves, treants, water elementals, and skeletons from enemy undead. And then you've got buffs, debuffs, which are dispellable. And this includes things like Entangling Roots, Hex, Banish, perhaps? What else? Human has 1, right? Human has 2. Spellbreaker, Spell Bounce, and Priest Dispel. Fairy Fire, slow. Yeah, slow. Let's say slow. Fairy Fire, Polymorph are not common enough to talk about them. So, I think for Undead to have a Dispel earlier than tier 3.5 is a pretty good idea. And I think Wand of Negation could be that idea. The main problem is that this is the tech route and the speed with which you can get Wand of Negation. And by the way, this is roughly game time 9 minutes 30 seconds, roughly. That is how early first Dispel at 9 minutes 30 seconds. This is roughly how early you can have Dispel. Is it Dispel with 2 L's or 1 L? Dispel. I don't know. I thought it's with 2 L's. It's 1? Oh, okay, cool. How about this? This spell. Is that with 2 L's or 1 L? This spell. This is correct. 2, 0. Okay. So this is how the tech route for Wand of Negation looks like. By Wand of Negation, which is tier 2.001. And the game time for this is 4 minutes 45 seconds at the earliest, or on average. On average, this is 5 minutes 5 seconds or something. So that is a lot earlier than usual. And I think this is too early, even if this maybe is too late. 9 minute 30 is too late, but I think this is maybe too early. So because the Tomb of Relics is tier 1, and then you can instantly buy it once you get tier 2, that feels OP to me. There's a couple of things you could do. You could make Tomb of Relics tier 2. That's stupid. They need a lot of necromancy to creep. Unless you give them Necromancer from the Crypt. You could make Wand of Negation tier 3. Tier 3.0000001. Which would lead to a time of Wand of Negation coming out at 8 minutes to 8 minutes 45 seconds or so. Which is still earlier than the first Dispel via Destroyers. It is a nice buff, and it is an alternative. But what it doesn't do is take away the prerequisite of going to tier 3 in order to unlock Dispel, which will still be the only race that will need to do so to get Dispel. But being the only race to do something is not bad design. That's interesting design. It's asymmetric design. I think this is a pretty elegant solution and a good early test to see how good Wand of Negation is going to be. There is another thing you could do. You could keep it in tier 2 as before, but change what it does. Dispelling buffs like Entangling Roots, Hex, Banish, Slow is important. Give it this. But make Wand of Negation special in that it does not do this. It does not remove or damage summons. It only removes buffs, debuffs. Which will be the first Dispel that works that way as far as I know. That also puts a burden on the programming team to not just fiddle with numbers, but to actually make real engine changes. And I'm not sure if they're going to be willing to do that. So the alternative would be to keep the damage against summons, but make it a lot less. Instead of 200, 225, which is what it does right now, you could make it do 50 damage, 100 damage, so that you cannot just use Wand of Negation to remove all the summons at once, collect experience, and remove the numerical threat of the summons. There's another thing you could do, which is to give it, just like Staff of Preservation, a shared cooldown and a cooldown. So a cooldown and a shared cooldown. So right now, Rod of Necromancy has a cooldown, but it does not have a shared cooldown, which means if you have a Rod of Necromancy with 4 charges, you can use it on Death Knight, but you can't use it again for another 30 seconds on Death Knight. But you can hand it over to the Lich, who uses it, and you can hand it to the Dark Ranger, who uses it. So Rod of Necromancy, cooldown, but no shared cooldown. Wand of Negation has no cooldown or shared cooldown. So if you're against 3 level 3 water elementals with the triple charge Wand of Negation, you could just be like 1-1-1, which is Wand of Negation, which is how we used to call it in Reign of Chaos. What happened with the font here? Anyway, you could do 1-1-1 with a single hero, all in 0.1 second, and you insta-kill 3 water elementals. This is pretty strong, and it goes outside of the probably intended purpose of giving Undead a way to deal with Entangling Roots and Hex. You don't need 1-1 to deal with these. This is specifically very good against summons. And so when I played with Wand of Negation, I found it very OP against summons in particular. Though I found it nice to have against Entangling Roots and Hex, obviously. Also very strong, but perhaps nice, and perhaps one part of facilitating a tier 3 loss style for Undead, which is interesting design. Most likely Happy will still go to tier 3 because he's addicted to Orb of Corruption, but there will be many Undead players that will experiment with playing at tier 2 now that they have an earlier Dispel. So those are my suggestions. To summarize them, either move Wand of Negation prerequisite to tier 3, or remove their damage against summons, or reduce their damage against summons, and or give them a cooldown and a shared cooldown so you can't spam them. For the rest, I think these changes are not bad, but I think there's better and more things that need to be done with it. Curse duration reduced from 2 minutes on units and 1 minute on hero to 1 minute on units, 30 seconds on heroes. Yes. Yes. Good. Good change. Naga Mana Shield activation cost reduced from 25 to 10. Good change. Good. This ability does not really get used much. Firelord's Soul Burn damage reduction increased from -50% to -75%. Yes. Good change. Firelord is slowly becoming OP, and I'm here for it. I will let everyone know, and especially I'll let Ragnaros know, that I voted for him to be my lord. I will be his loyal serf. Firelord Soulburn hero duration increased from 789 to 8910. Sure, why not? Why does Mana Shield have an activation cost? To make it be a meaningful decision to toggle it on or off. Otherwise, you can just turn it on like this. On to block this, off. And that feels cheap, and it felt cheap when Immolation had no mana cost trigger. You would constantly turn it on the moment you're next to someone and instantly turn it off, which means you were never wasting any mana. It was never a meaningful decision to turn on Immolation. You just turned it on and off. It was so good for reducing mana consumption, and you were always dealing bonus damage when you were next to someone, and the damage was buffed. It was too good. It needs to be a meaningful decision. This is still a meaningful decision. You're not just going to do this because you've just wasted 30 mana, right? But I think 25 price point is too high, particularly because mana is such a valuable resource that you almost never actually want to burn mana to save health on Naga. You'd rather just staff. Keep in mind, Moonwell's mana regen on a hero is 4 times more expensive than health. So why would you trade any mana for health? Because the Naga Sea Witch, when you look at the mana shield, 1 mana blocks 2 damage. So that's still twice as expensive to regen from the Moonwell. It's only when you have Mana Shield level 3 is that the regeneration that you do on the Naga is equal. Is equal whether you do the mana or the health, right? Because now mana paid itself 4 times over in health. So when it comes to Moonwells, Mana Shield is always a big drain, and of course everything should be a drain. If you were to use Entangle, that's also a drain on your Moonwell. Spells should cast things. It's just that mana is such a valuable resource that even in battle, if you have 3 Forked Lightnings, that's way better than having 1 Forked Lightning. And the Naga can drop from 100% life to 20, but she's still doing the same damage because this is Warcraft 3 and not Company of Heroes. In Company of Heroes or Dawn of War, your regiment shrinks in size when it starts taking damage. Some members of your regiment have died and they now are not doing any damage. But in Warcraft 3, a unit at 1 HP is just as good as a unit at 100% HP. So using Mana Shield to start blocking off damage when you're full life or half life often feels like a massive waste because now you only have 2 Forked Lightnings or 1 instead of 3 or 4. Which means you're not bursting and killing the enemy units as much, which directly addresses their ability to put out damage when you finish them off. This is partially why Mana Shield is not such a popular ability. It's also on a hero that's ranged, that's often standing behind other things like Druid of the Claw, Demon, etc. So yeah, Mana Shield may by design never become very popular or good. Small little nerfs like removing activation cost, I think is a good thing to allow people to play with the idea of using this. After all, Naga is much used by Night Elf, and they often like to put Orb of Venom on ranged heroes. I could see Naga going Frost Arrow level 1, then picking 2 points in Fork Lightning, and then picking 1 point in Mana Shield, while picking up an Orb of Venom at level 4, and then going level 3 Fork Lightning, and then the big decision will come at level 6 to see if Naga Sea Witch is going to go for the Tornado with that juicy 150 movement speed that we see in the combined patch notes that came last PTR. It's like, oh my god, the Naga Sea Witch Tornado speed is now twice as fast. That is a natural disaster for the opponents. Will they go for the Tornado, or will they get Mana Shield upgrade level 2? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Is that as fast as a Peon? No, that's slower than a Glaive Thrower. That's still 60% slower than a Glaive Thrower. But Tornado has a lot of suction, so you may not be able to outrun it if it slowed you down first. Last week someone asked me if Tornado sucks, and I asked ChatGPT, and they said it kind of sucks when you're suffering a tornado because of its destructive damage, and there's also kind of a suction effort by the way that it pulls in air and the way it pulls it around and so on. So yeah, I am now an experienced commentator on tornado sucking. So, Firelord Soulburn, Naga, Firelord Soulburn. Okay, cool. Items. Ankh of Reincarnation delay reduced from 7 to 5 seconds. That is the same as Resurgence of the Storm and Heroes of the Storm. And how is the reincarnation in Dota 2? Is that 5 seconds as well for Aegis? I believe it is. I believe it is. Which of course should have no bearing at all. Aegis, Roshan. It should have no bearing at all on Warcraft 3. Yeah, effect delay 5. So this is probably a big brain play to lower the friction of learning Warcraft 3 for Dota 2 players. Dota 2 probably has a monthly active user base of over 1 million players. I believe now the friction has been reduced enough for them to start experimenting with playing Warcraft 3 melee, now that Ankh has the same duration. In all seriousness though, Ankh of Reincarnation is an item that does have a lot of use, but gets sold probably less and less compared to before. Being a passive enemy must interact with it item, Ankh of Reincarnation is less popular than items that immediately affect the first 10 seconds of a battle. So it is a little underpowered compared to similar drops. I don't mind this delay reduction, this buff at all. I think it's fine. Gloves of Haste. Attack speed increase from 15 to 20%. Cool. You may not know that Gloves of Haste has a greater effect on certain heroes than others. This is a completely hidden stat that Blizzard does not want you to know about. That you don't know about. You see, here's the attack speed formula. Using a hero's basic cooldown of attack and using increased attack speed, the attack speed of a hero is calculated using this formula. Attack speed equals your basic cooldown of attack divided by, parenthesis, 1 plus your increased attack speed. So that means if your BCD is low and you add attack speed, that you benefit more than if your BCD is high. You benefit more from that attack speed. Now, agility is part of that attack speed equation. And it is additively added together with item bonuses and ability bonuses. That means, yeah, it's the same as basic attack time from Dota. That means that heroes with good natural BCD benefit more. And it also means that you can never look at a hero at face value and say, okay, this is how fast he's attacking. When I add gloves to this hero, it will actually increase his DPS by 15%. Because it doesn't. Because there was already bonuses added to the thing that you're witnessing via their base agility, item agility, etc. So on average, and you're just gonna have to believe me unless you're good at maths, which I'm not, on average, when you pick up a Gloves of Haste in Warcraft 3, you're not getting plus 15% IAS from gloves is not 15% DPS extra. The average a hero gets from gloves, as far as I know, as far as I can guesstimate, approximate, I wet my finger and put it in the sky and I try to guess the wind direction. It's something like 7 to 11, 6 to 12% DPS, something like this. It's gonna have a bigger effect on a Blade Master and a Demon Hunter than it will on a Priestess of the Moon and a Warden, because the aforementioned heroes have higher, they have a better basic cooldown of attack. So, Gloves of Haste getting better, in conclusion, will more greatly affect the heroes that are already good at using it. That means that Gloves of Haste is a better buff to the Blood Mage, Archmage, Blade Master, Demon Hunter than it is to the Warden, Priestess, Farseer Shadow, TC. It's good for Lich, it's good for Blade, and it's bad for Priestess and Paladin and TC. You would think that a big, heavy axe-wielding TC that attacks slowly but hard benefits more from attack speed, logically and intuitively, but your intuition is wrong. Blade Master effects is better affected. So, do I agree with this change? Well, it makes the rich richer and the poor stay more poor, which I guess is not fantastic, though on the other hand, it is a design, it is a design niche that now gets amplified even more. Then from the perspective of where does Gloves of Haste currently rank in terms of comparing it to the equivalent drops, in the current year of Warcraft 3, Gloves of Haste no longer gets equated to Circlet of Nobility. Circlet of Nobility has ascended to a higher item tier. It is now only equal to Ring of Protection plus 4 and Claws of Attack plus 5. And Gloves is the worst among those three. So then you would think that this is a good buff. And yeah, that's fine, I guess. That's fine. But I don't think it was needed either, because I don't think a bit of item imbalance is that big of a deal. Item tier list when? Soon. Let's see and wait on how this shakes out first. I think 17% is probably better. 20% feels like too much. 17, 18%. What do you guys think? Okay, next. Creeps. Sleep no longer targets heroes. Grubby, what's your favorite dinosaur? It's the Brontosaurus, because of Land Before Time. Wake up, Mom! Wake up! Come on, wake up! 3 stars! Sleep duration reduced from 10 to 8. Sleep cooldown increased. Sleep cost reduced. No longer target heroes. Okay, this is all fine. I guess this was an annoying spell to deal with, right? When you play FFA or 4-on-4. Dark Troll High Priest now has abolished magic. This is an extremely obscure change that most people will not have an opinion on, most likely. And I do have an opinion on it, because the Dark Troll High Priest is a creep that you can hire from the... There's a creep you can hire, I believe, from the mercenary camps on the dark purple maps. It is roughly equivalent to an in-between the normal troll priest of 2-pop and inner fire troll priest on fertile maps of 4-pop. This is a 3-pop. He has sleep and he has heal, but he doesn't have abolish. And normally mercamps have a creep that has dispel, and the purple-green maps do not have a dispel creeps in their mercamp. So now it is going to have a dispel. Maybe this is a good thing to create more consistency between different tile sets and different biomes. Enforcer and Bandit Lord no longer have Shadow Melt and will also sleep at night. I do not feel strongly about this. I feel about as strongly about this as a reunion for Westlife. It just doesn't really enter my agenda that much. Blood Wizard can now sleep. Enforcer HP. Rune of speed duration down from a minute to 20 seconds. Infernal Contraption move speed from 180 to 200. What is Infernal Contraption, pray tell? It is a 4 population medium range unit that hurls fiery missiles that you can hire from the mercenary camp on some Draenor biome maps. The red fiery chaos maps. Their movement speed is 180. It is going to be 200. This is a nice change. These units are super underutilized in multiplayer melee games. And they are fun. They look badass. They have a model and everything. They got a special attack. Sometimes piercing, sometimes chaos. Let's see more of them. They are slow. They lag behind. The Infernal Juggernaut is a 4 population unit that can call down an Infernal? It has 1500 health. Oh, I think I had this one recently in all the random. Yes, a creep that can summon Inferno. Let's make it faster. Why not? And then you've got the Infernal Machine, which has a breath of fire and is 1200 population. Don't worry, it's more than 275 gold. Yeah, make it faster. Why not? And that's it. Here's the master changelog that combine all the changes from the first patch note and the second patch note. By now it is quite a large list of changes, and I am overall very positive about these changes. I didn't agree with everything. I'm not going to summarize and recap everything because I've been yapping for over 1.5 hours almost. Hope you enjoyed this, and hope that being armed with this knowledge will change your life for the better. If it did, make sure to hit subscribe on this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.